Hi there and welcome back to Northlight Photographic Workshops. This is just going to be a quick addendum video and a video that I hope will help with people in their different alternative processes in photography, and that's basically we're going to be sizing, mixing up sizing for paper. Now what you do, most paper has a sizing on it anyway, but what I do in the gum over platinum process, which this is actually an addendum video for, is I like to size the paper after I've printed my palladium layer. And what that does is it protects the paper and seals it against chemical staining and also staining from the pigments, which you don't really want in the process, because you want to be able to wash everything out. And what happens is if you have not sized that paper or resized that paper after you have printed your base layer of palladium on there, very often what can happen is that Bichromate can stain into the paper and it can't be washed out. So basically, I like to, at least, I know that there are other people that don't size their paper for doing this process, but I like to do a resizing of the paper after I've printed my palladium layer. So the way I go about this, and I use Austrian gelatin. Now this is basically the old way. Knox gelatin will work also in a pinch. Unflavored and unsweetened gelatin from your grocery store will also work. But I like to use the deionized Austrian that comes from Bostic and Sullivan. Now it's a 250 bloom gelatin, and I get it in these 500 gram bottles. It can be kind of pricey. I'm not really sure what this one costs anymore, but you can look it up and there'll be links below to Bostic and Sullivan for getting this as well. But there are also other ways to size your paper, and there's more modern ways, which Gamblin makes a PVA size. And this PVA sizing is basically an acrylic sizing that you can coat the paper with as well. And it's much easier because you don't have to do what we're going to be doing right here with it. And you just kind of brush it onto your paper, let it dry, and then you're ready to print on it. But what it does is it tends to change the surface of the paper. And I don't like that. It tends to raise the tooth of the paper after it's put on, and the paper feels kind of coarse afterward. And that's just something I don't really like. So it's another personal preference thing. You can order Gamblin PVA sizing, and I'll also put a link to that below in the descriptions down below the video here. But I'm going to put that aside for now, and what we're going to do is we're going to do the old way, and this is the way that I like to do it, using the Austrian gelatin. Now, it's very simple. You need a little hot plate. It's good to have a, I'll turn mine on here. It's good to have a little, mine's a Mr. Coffee, a little hot plate for a cup in your office, that kind of thing. And it works really well because it raises the temperature up to just about where you need it. I'm going to mix this up this time in 200 milliliters. Now, I like to mix 4 grams of gelatin to 100 milliliters of water. But this time I'm going to mix up 200 milliliters because I've got quite a few prints that you can see behind me that I'm getting ready to size. So I'm going to mix up a 200 milliliter batch here. So I'm going to be using 8 grams of the ionized gelatin. Now you're also going to need a scale, of course, and I like to use a glass stirring rod. But otherwise it's very simple. Now what we're going to do is we're going to mix the 8 grams of gelatin into the water, but we have to let it bloom. And the thing saying blooming is what it does is it kind of absorbs the water over an amount of time, usually about 15-20 minutes. And it blooms, and you can see it, and I'll show you here what happens. But you let it bloom, and also I like to start heating it right away, because also in blooming the gelatin and heating it, it activates it, and you mix it up and it activates it, and what will happen is when you turn that heat off, it'll eventually go into a solid again. Now, but then you can just turn the heat back on and it goes back into liquid so that you can use it again. Now you can do that a couple of times, but if you leave it in a gelatin state more than a couple of days, it can start to grow bacteria on it, just like in a petri dish, and you don't want that. So basically try to use it all in one sitting, or if not, use it over a couple of days, and then you should be fine with it. Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to measure out the gelatin, and we're going to set the scale here. And again, I'm going to be doing 8 grams of the ionized gelatin, of the deionized gelatin. And there we go, we're at 0. I'm going to set the tare for my little tray here, and now what I'm going to do is measure out 8 grams. So I'm just going to tap that out. Now there's nothing dangerous about this, so wearing gloves and glasses isn't really necessary. It's a personal preference. Now, mixing other chemicals, I always wear glasses and I always wear gloves. So there I've got 2.5 grams, 3 grams, and there we go. We are at 8 grams. So set this up to the side, put the lid on everything always, set it up to the side here. Now I'm going to take my 8 grams of gelatin here, and you can see it's kind of a powder, like a yellowish powder. And I'll just dump that right here into my beaker. Yes, it's always good to have glass beakers around as well. So what I'm going to do is, you can see it kind of turns into a big glob, and I'm just going to drop it in there. Now, I'll show you this there. You can see how it just kind of sits in a big glob there. Now what I'm saying about blooming, what's going to happen over the next 15-20 minutes is that's going to absorb more water, it's going to bloom and it's going to expand, and it's going to be easier for me to stir it in. So I'm just going to leave it sit here with my stirring rod for now, and we will come back here in about 15 minutes and I'll show you what it looks like then. Okay, so about 15 minutes has gone by, and as you can see, the gelatin has been blooming and it's starting to grow up off the bottom here. Now, I'll put this up close to this camera and you can see what I'm talking about. Now what happens is that this is absorbing and it's blooming in the gelatin. Now it's just about to the point where I can just start to stir it like this. And as you can see, it goes much more up into a solution this way. Now what I'm going to do is we will leave this sit here, and with it, it'll clear. As you can see that it's kind of cloudy right now, and as it becomes more ready, it will clear more. I will again show you in a few minutes what that looks like. But anyway, we're just about there. And then once you're there, as I said, you can leave this, you can turn off your hot plate, you could leave it to cool and it turns into a solid gelatin. I'll show you that as well, it's kind of fun. And you can also reheat it so it goes back into a liquid again. Okay, so we're gonna wait a few minutes and I'll be back. So now it's about 20 minutes since I last left you here, and you can see how this has gotten quite a bit clearer. And now we're ready to rock. It's all been dissolved in, it's all bloomed correctly, and it's all dissolved into the solution. So we're ready to go. You want to leave it on the hot plate while you're working with it just to keep it warm. But as soon as you're done, you can turn it off, and I'll show you what happens when we do that. But before we do that, I'm going to clean up the area here a little bit, and what we're going to do is we are going to actually size a print. I'm going to show you how I go about doing that. What I like to do is use paper towel liberally, and I like to take a couple layers to put it underneath the print before I do it. Now I'm going to grab one of these prints back here, and another thing you're going to need in this is a bit of formaldehyde. Now formaldehyde, as I was telling you, is that most of this part of this process is not dangerous as far as chemistry goes. The formaldehyde is, but you're not going to use very much of it. It's got fumes. I don't want you to be breathing in the fumes for a long time. If you do tend to be sensitive to it, you might want to get a mask with an organic respirator on it, or organic cartridges. But really, there's not that much around. You keep the bottle sealed, and it's just a small amount. Now, an alternative to using formaldehyde would be to use glyoxal. It will work to harden you're using both of these as a hardener for the sizing. And the glyoxal works as well. It's not anywhere near as caustic as formaldehyde. You have to use a little bit more of it, and the thing I don't like about it is it tends to yellow your paper a little bit. Now that might be not a problem for you, but it tends to warm up or maybe yellow the paper a little bit. So I tend to not like to use the glyoxal. I like to use just formaldehyde. Now you use it in very small amounts, as I said. Now I have another small beaker here, and what I like to do is pour out about 5 milliliters of this on a small print that I'm doing like this. This is about an 8.5 by 11 print that I'm going to do here. Now this print, as you can see, has already been printed with the palladium layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to size this piece of paper and this print so that it can be, another layer of gum bichromate can be added to it. So it will protect the paper, as I said earlier in the video. It will protect the paper against staining in the future. So what I like to do is pour out about 5 milliliters of this, and this gelatin sizing is ready to go. Now, What I also do is add a little bit of formaldehyde. Now the formaldehyde, as I said before, acts as a hardener. And what that will do is I'll coat this piece of paper with it, but in short amount of time it will harden on there, and as the paper dries it will be permanent on this paper. It won't wash out anymore. Now, as I said before, if you did not put the hardener in the gelatin would just go back to liquid. So if you put it back into water, wash the paper again, something like that, it would wash the sizing away. So the hardener is very important to use. Now what I like to do is use about 1 drop of formaldehyde per 5 milliliters of sizing of the gelatin. So I'm just going to put 1 drop in here, and I will mix it up really well. And then another thing that you want to use is a coating rod or a brush. You can use a hake brush. I don't like to use brushes because sometimes they'll leave behind bristles, and the bristles will stay in the gelatin and they're hard to get out afterward. I like to use a coating rod like this. Now, you can find them online. I'll try to leave a link below for you. They don't cost very much. It's basically a piece of acrylic tubing affixed to another piece of acrylic. You just want something that's long and flat so that you can put it on the paper and you can rub it across the paper like this. Now let me move this out of the way so that you can see what I'm doing here on this other camera. So now that I've got the hardener mixed in here, you don't want to leave it too long. I'm going to go here and I put down my coating rod and I pour the sizing on there, and then what I do is I very lightly just drag it across the print. And you can see at the edges of it, you can see where you've coated. And I've pretty much coated the whole thing. Now, I've got a puddle left over here, and rather than push it off the edge, I like to go back one more time, and then I push it back around using the same size of this, and I just make sure that I've coated the whole piece of paper. And then I go off one more time, like this, and I draw it off into the paper towel, and it's absorbed off into the paper towel. And then I take this size now piece of paper and I put it over on my drying screens so that it will dry out, and then I can further print it later on. So I'll set that over here right now. And there, that's 1 print ready to go. Now, what I also do is right after this is done, I'll take and I'll wash off my coating rod here, and I will also wash out the little beaker. Now if I'm doing more prints at one time, I'll continue this process a little bit as it goes, but you don't want to go too many. I'll coat maybe 5 pieces of paper at a time before I once again wash down the coating rod and wash down the beaker, because the hardener starts to set in and the sizing will start to harden in there. So anyway, I'm going to get that cleaned up now. And that pretty much does it. Hopefully this will help you out with not only the gum over platinum process, but with other gum bichromate processes as well, the tricolor process, 4-color processes, whatever. This is a good base sizing to use for your alternative processing on the different papers that you use. Now, I like to use Hahnemühle photo rag, but there's a lot of different papers that you can use for this process. So anyway, thanks. If you're doing the gum bichromate video right now, the link is up here. If you are going on to something else, or if you've enjoyed this, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, I hope you do. And that's about it. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye. Have fun printing.